Shalom and welcome to Biblical Faith with Sam Peak. We invite you to join us as Sam brings a study in the Torah from the Jewish sages. And now our speaker, Sam Peak.
Shalom Aleichem. So we are still looking in this wonderful part of the Mishnah called Pirkei Avot, the chapters of the fathers, and it's also translated sometimes as or interpreted as the ethics of the fathers. All of the great rabbis of ancient times who have given us bits and pieces of wisdom that we have seen so far are absolutely unbelievable. We are in chapter 2 of Pirkei Avot, and in Mishnah 3, I believe. No, that's wrong. We're in Mishnah 6. And this is Hillel the Great, who is still speaking here. And we'd come to the end of it, and we'll just pick up where we left off. But first we need to just reiterate the Mishnah so that we're all on the same page. Where it says, he used to say, a boor cannot be fearful of sin, and an unlearned person cannot be scrupulously pious. A bashful or a shy are, I've studied this since we were together before, and really that bashful or shy person, what it amounts to is, I've come to understand it in a different way. I would actually translate it now as lazy. Okay? A lazy person cannot learn. And the quick and impatient person cannot teach. Anyone, he says, who is excessively occupied in business cannot become a scholar. And in a place where there are no people to take charge, where there is no leadership, try to be a person who takes charge. Okay? All right. That's it. And where we left off, we actually had come to using the Maharals. Most of this, what we were looking at, is commentary that comes, or comments that come directly from the commentary of the Maharal, Rabbi Yehuda Loew of Prague. All right? We have to remember all the time that Rabbi Judah Loew of Prague, the Maharal, was a really extremely advanced Kabbalist, a Mekubal. But he had his own language, in a sense, okay? He had his own terms. Like you remember at the very first start of this when we were looking at the Maharal's outlook on the way the world is and what is formed. And, Homer, just the material, and then Sruah, what it's shaped into being, all of these things. But he's still talking to us many times. He's teaching us on multiple levels. And oftentimes he's teaching just on his understanding of the Kabbalah, of the Sod level of the Torah. But like so many rabbis, like for instance, like the Baal HaSulam today, Rabbi Yehuda Lev Ashlag, he also, because he's one of the few great rabbis who really wrote a very extensive commentary on the Zohar, and he's really able to pick up on things, he also coins his own terms, like haratzon lekabel rak leatzmi, the will to receive just for myself, okay? And other rabbis had different terms for they're talking about exactly the same thing, all right. And the only reason I get off into all that is just to prepare us for what's in the future, because oftentimes the Maharal is really teaching us on an extremely high level. Okay, all right. So let's pick up. And in his commentary here, the Maharal says, in this particular Mishnah of Hillel, he says there are 4 prescriptions for spiritual health. If you have the book, Pirkei Avot, we're on the bottom of page 93, where he says 4 prescriptions for spiritual health. One of the ways, he says, that Pirkei Avot guides us to achieving spiritual growth, all right, is by helping us to understand ourselves. The people that are described in this Mishnah are simply illustrations, he says, of disorders that are due to neglect of the 4 areas of our existence. Okay, so this is something the Maharal really excelled in, where he would take a particular area, or like a human being, Whether it's the body, he would deal sometimes with the body, but more often than not, he would deal with the soul. Or he would deal with your spiritual life, or your spiritual and physical life together. But what he did was he categorized everything. He was very good at looking at something and being able to penetrate it and saying, okay, this falls into 3 phases, or this falls into 10 areas, okay, and then tell us what they all are and put them all together. And that's what he's going to do here. So these 4 areas, okay, 4 prescriptions, he says, for spiritual health. And it's not just for spiritual health, we're going to see. 4 areas of our existence, he says, what we need. Now again, he uses the word sekel. We need a healthy intellect. And we're going to find out that sekel to him, intellect, is part of your nephesh. It's part of your soul. All right? Then, now Rabbi Basser translates the word spirit. I'm not sure, I don't really think he's actually saying ruach here in that sense. I don't have the original Hebrew in front of me. I'm using Rabbi Basser's translation. But we'll learn more about it as we go on here. Actually, I think that's the word nephesh, is the word that's being translated spirit. In fact, I know it is now that I look down on the page a little further. So we need a healthy intellect, a healthy soul, a healthy nephesh, and a healthy body, and a healthy approach, then he says, to material possessions, to living a physical life in this world. All right. So he says the prescription for good spiritual health is easily recognized in each of these cases. So first, the intellect, the Hebrew term sekel. He says that is actually the most spiritual part of a person. And the boor, okay, and the unlearned person, they manifest symptoms, he says, they do not develop their intellect, all right? They just don't develop it. They don't work on it. They're not learning. One who acts with reason, he says, can grasp the proper reverence for the Creator. And if we grasp the proper reverence for the Creator, then we can act with true piety. Therefore, one should strive to acquire wisdom. Again, when he says strive to acquire wisdom, what actually does that mean? What do I think he's meaning? Well, if we realize that the Maharal was a very, very great Kabbalist, a very, very great Mekubal. In fact, he is the rabbi of the legend of the Golem, you know, where he literally brought to life a clay man in order to protect the Jewish community because he knew the correct pronunciation of Hashem's name. This is the level that he's on. So when someone who is a real Kabbalist, when they say wisdom, chokmah, or hakmah in this case, what is it actually that they mean? We have to understand that Kabbalah itself is known by this term, okay, the level of Kabbalah, in other words, the sod level of understanding the secrets, understanding the real mysteries of the Torah, of how everything is connected, of the unity of Hashem, the unity of God, all of those things, that's what it's talking about. And that word that Kabbalah uses, or that the Kabbalists use to actually describe this area of knowledge, is Chakmat Ha'emet, the wisdom of the truth, all right? So anytime I see the Maharal say, you should strive to acquire wisdom, he doesn't just mean what most normal people would think of as wisdom. I think personally he's making a reference to really understanding the sod level of the Torah, the deepest level of the Torah is what he's talking about, okay? Which all has to do with literally changing your perception to where in a place where Hashem is totally concealed, you begin to sense Him, you begin to know Him, you begin to realize that He's there, even though He's totally concealed. Okay. So that has to do with the intellect, but it has to be grown. And by the way, I don't know, maybe we won't make it past this one thing. By the way, how do we do that, actually? Well, of course we study, and we're going to see the rabbis are telling us all through Pirkei Avot, study, study, study. But what is it about study that actually begins to develop us and begins to change us? Again, we have to come to a modern day, very, very great Kabbalist, the Baal HaSulam, who tells us exactly what that is. He says, you know what you know, he says, we're separated from Hashem by this ratzon to receive, this will to receive, okay? That's what separates us from Him. And especially the will to receive just for ourselves alone, where we're totally egoistic and self-centered, and everything we're doing is coming from that particular desire. And he says, and God gives us the Torah in order to assist us in transforming that into a will to receive, because we have to receive. If we don't, we go out of existence in this world, okay? Into a will to receive in order to bestow, in order to give to benefit others, in order to please Hashem, these things. And this brings us into affinity of form with Hashem, spiritual form, and that brings us back close to Him, even to the point where we can become one with Him. That's the whole idea. But how does that happen? He says, because he says, you know what you'll do? He says, you'll take Torah and you'll study and study and you'll implement changes in your life and all of these things. And he says, and then all of a sudden you discover, and you do all this hard work, but he said all of a sudden you discover, boom, in 5 seconds you can be right back where you were before. So is there no permanence in it? Is there no change in it? Am I really developing, or am I just fooling myself? And so he gives us the prescription. He says, number one, it's all based on that studying Torah, number one, it increases our will to receive God. It makes us have a desire for Him, okay? And that, he said, eventually brings us to the point, and he says, and the reason all of a sudden in 5 seconds it can all be gone, and you go, whoa. He says, because that makes you eventually cry out, Galinai, open my eyes, please open my eyes that I may behold the wonders of your Torah, okay? He says, and He will. Now, the second part of that is, he says, when we study, and this is what makes, whether we're doing it by audio, whether we're doing it in a classroom like this, or whether we're doing it just by audio alone, or whether we're doing it by audio and video, whatever method we're doing, we're together. You understand what I'm trying to say? Even if it's on a tape that you hear much later on, you can still be together with the Torah and with the teacher, and in a sense together with everybody else who is involved in the class, who is involved in the study. And he says, and the study of Torah in this way, okay, draws down to us, attracts to us what's called or makif, the surrounding light. And he says, and this is actually the way Hashem opens your eyes. He says, and it's all by grace, every bit of it, and that Hashem opens your eyes because you draw to yourself this surrounding light, and that becomes, it has to be internalized, it has to become a part of you, of who you are. So you have to literally eat it in a sense. And that is what brings you to spiritual growth. That's what develops your seko, which has your intellect, which has a profound effect on all the rest of everything else. So are we together on that? So the study of Torah, number one, we should do it to please Hashem. Even if you're studying by yourself and you're just using, say, a book on the commentary, I do this, this is just my practice, my personal practice. But I've studied for many, many years with great rabbis like Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the Ramchal. I mean, when I sit and study with him, he sits at the table with me. This is just a device to use, and to put yourself really into the effort and into the group. Okay, I'll get off of that. I'm just trying to give you a helpful thing, all right? Because we have to know how to do it, and we have to know, why are we studying, and what does studying actually do? It draws to us the surrounding light from God above, from another level, okay, from the level above us, that can literally change everything for us. if we're just paying attention. And if we want God, we have to want Him. As much as you want to eat, as much as you want to do the other everything else that's beneficial to your ego, you have to want Him. That's the whole idea. Okay, all right. Then, now, Rabbi Basser translates spirit, but I would say soul because it's the word nephesh, okay? Animates the body, he says. That was part one, okay, was intellect, the seko. Now, nephesh. It animates the body. And now now he's talking about, actually when he's talking about intellect up here, maybe he's talking about actually the higher levels of your soul, okay? Now when he mentions nephesh, he's talking about literally the animal soul, in the sense of it's the emotion powers of your soul, because look what he says. He says, this is what animates the body, and it is the origin of impatience and temper. Yeah, all right? So he's talking about the animal part of your soul. Hillel illustrates this disorder by describing one whose anger and impatience interferes with teaching Torah. And he says, and this is the second prescription. Do not be drawn excessively after your emotions. Okay? This is the key, and we've talked about this a lot. This is where we've talked about these two parts of our soul, the divine part of the soul, the brains, the mochin. It's outlaid according to the 10 sfirot, and the upper 3 sfirot are the brains, and the lower 7 are those emotion powers. So who's running the business? That's the idea. Okay? Now, again, he says, one who is too shy, and I'm going to tell you why I think it's lazy, is functioning as a placid body, something that's not moving. Now, the next thing he says, if we give in to lethargy, well, that's just being lazy. No movement, no change. Instead of living our lives with spirited enthusiasm, then it will interfere with Torah study. And I really much prefer, because it's actually a good quality to be shy, to be humble, to be modest, all of those things. And I don't want people to understand this, because really what Hillel is saying and what the Maharal is saying is this person is, the word they're using is shy, but literally they're lazy. They don't want to move. They don't want to move. All right? So, and he says, and that it interferes with Torah study. The third prescription is, show some spirit. Show some life. Be alive. Do not be excessively drawn after the physical characteristics of passivity and inertia, or let's put it in our language, what we used. Don't be lazy. You can't be lazy when it comes to studying Torah. You can't be lazy when it comes to doing the mitzvot. That's really what this Mishnah is saying, as far as I'm concerned. Then finally, possessions, material possessions. The possessions that sustain one in this world can distract a person from spiritual pursuits, all right? Isn't that the truth? So the final prescription is do not be excessively drawn after money, but pursue a livelihood in moderation, what you need in order, and especially what you need in order to do the most important thing, to be able to study Torah. Now that doesn't mean making money is a bad thing, and but what it does mean, what it's talking about, again, it's on the level of the will to receive for yourself alone. Is that the most important thing to you, or is money simply a tool? It's simply a tool that we use to work in this world. Or is it an end in and of itself? You see what I'm saying? The deal is this is the way it is in this world. And it's that way for a reason, and it's that way for a purpose. And Hashem uses us. It's a test to be a poor person. It's a much harder test to be a rich person. And as the Ramchal tells us, but we have to have money, and we have to use the money as a tool to help others, as a tool to do things that are pleasing to Hashem, and that's the key to it. Okay, all right. Now, and finally, on the last part of it, where it says, and in a place where there is know people to take, in order to lead or take charge, strive to be a person who takes charge. And it says this statement may appear to be unrelated to the rest of the Mishnah, he says, but actually it completes the entire theme of this Mishnah. The first part of the Mishnah addressed aspects of a person, of an individual person, okay? Individual aspects of a person. Laziness, not developing the intellect, being involved with material possessions, all of these things, okay? These are different aspects of a person. But this advice, this final advice, he says, addresses the entire total human being, puts it all together. If something must be done and there is no one else to do it, then be the person to do it. Okay? There is extra merit in doing the right thing, if otherwise it will not be done at all. Now, but look at his final comment. He says, however, if there is someone else who will do it, and he says equally well, but I think we should say equally well or better, okay, and who is willing to do it, then let that person, if they're more qualified than you, let them take it. Let them lead. Let them volunteer, all right? Anyway, he's basically telling us, have some life. Get up and do something, okay? Don't sit around, wait for it all to fall on you. You have to get up and do something. In order to develop your intellect, in order to keep the emotion powers of your own nephesh under control, in order to correctly use material possessions, you can't be lazy. You can't be passive. You have to move. Okay. All right. Now, in the time we have left, this is actually very mysterious Mishnah from Hillel. Let's read it. We'll at least introduce it.
Number 7?
Mishnah number 7, chapter 2. He saw a skull floating on the water, and he said to it, because you drowned others, they drowned you. And those who drowned you will eventually, in the end, they will be drowned. I've read this Mishnah for years and always thought to myself, I hate to admit it, but I don't understand one thing that he's saying. But after many years of study, not of this Mishnah, but of just growing in Torah study, I know now that great rabbis, great unbelievable Torah sages, like Hillel the Great, that he wouldn't just say something if it didn't have unbelievably profound levels of meaning to it, all right? So we have to realize that this is not a simple thing that he is saying at all, and absolutely not simple. I'm dissatisfied with what's in this commentary, but we're going to go through it because I think I'll be able to interject what I have, and maybe we can do it in the last few minutes. Let me read a little bit, okay? Hillel's words, he says, commence with, because you drowned, which tells us, so in other words, we're going to examine, what are these deep meanings? That God metes out punishment in like kind for a transgression. And this is the concept of midah keneged midah, measure for measure, okay? But this principle needs to be clarified because we know that not every murderer is ultimately murdered. That doesn't happen. And we know that not everyone who has been drowned has drowned someone else, and that's the reason that they got drowned. So there must be something much deeper going on here. Why Hillel is saying this. So the Mishnah therefore added the image of a skull floating on water to put Hillel's words into context, okay? Hillel, the Maharal says Hillel actually saw a drowned body. And the Mishnah portrays the entire corpse as a skull. Why just as a skull? To convey that the victim had been severed from the roots of life and left nothing behind. No reputation and no one to remember him. Had it been the corpse of someone who left a mark on the world, then Hillel would not have concluded that it was the corpse of a murderer. All right, now let him go on and explain this. He said to it, because you drowned others. In fact, he says it's floating on Panei Hamayim, on the face of the water, okay? So we have this another image in our heads now. All of these are images, okay, that are just metaphors meaning something else. So we have the metaphor of a skull, and now the metaphor of water. Water that washes something away is itself washed away in the same process. It erases something, okay? This image describes the forces of retribution that the person himself had set in motion. He was destroyed by the backwash of the powerful destructive forces that he had unleashed against his victim. He must have destroyed, and here's the key, he must have destroyed his victim's reputation and eradicated any impact that the victim may have made on the world. In other words, he completely erased that person's life. And that's why we have the water, because that's what it does. So Hillel's comments are made in the context of a person who deserved to have his life, past, present, and future, destroyed. This observation, he says, does not apply to a typical drowning victim, and it does not even apply to a murderer who only takes a victim's life, but does not eradicate that entire victim's history, all his accomplishments, as if he never existed. In fact, he says, our history is filled with righteous and innocent and ordinary people who were brutally murdered, and these people didn't harm anyone. The image of the disembodied skull was designed to exclude this kind of victim because they, in fact, left the blessing of their memory and a legacy for future generations. The imagery in this Mishnah is entirely based on water, which in Hebrew has a plural form, ma'im, okay? Therefore, Hillel says, they drowned you, okay? The they is a reference to the metaphor of the water. And those who drowned you will be drowned eventually in the end. He says, retribution for such a violent, extensive crime is quite likely to come because the crime itself precipitates the punishment. Those murderers who do have natural and peaceful deaths, he says, will be drowned in the world to come. He said, and that's an even yet more severe form of being drowned. Now, let me tell you my personal take. My personal take is with this idea of just the skull, meaning, as the Maharal pointed out, meaning it's completely cut off from their life, okay? And the image of water. The whole thing is all about, it doesn't even necessarily have to do with someone who literally murders someone else with a knife or a gun or whatever. It has to do with actually taking everything away from a person. Their life, their reputation, their possessions, no matter what it is. In other words, water erases, completely erasing a person, all right? And Hillel's whole thing is if the reason you've been erased is because in your life you erased other people. Let's put it this way, all right? When we finally get a hold of it, it's a very scary thing, because how can we erase people? We can erase them with our mouth. We can erase them by doing them harm in other ways, as well as erase them by physically killing them, okay? Hillel's talking about all this on all these different levels. And that's an unbelievable warning, an absolute unbelievable warning, especially if you ever run into people who you have seen them out to destroy, literally destroy, erase another person, and they lead a campaign on it. And they might not ever think of actually physically killing the person, but they're murdering them nonetheless. All right? I think Hillel is talking about this on all these different levels because that really is what it has to do. And it's a big warning. It's a big warning to all of us, never ever to be engaged in such kind of activity with anybody. Okay? That's my take. All right. Now, the next time we are together, we have a big, long Mishnah that Hillel gives, and it will take us a good while to work through it. And it's chapter 2 and Mishnah 8. And that's what we'll do, if it's okay with you. Okay? Only if it's okay with you.
Yes, it is.
All right. All right. Then that's exactly where we'll start the next time we're together, Bezrat Hashem, with God's help. But just in case you didn't know it, I heard from my rabbi, Rabbi Richmond, Chaim Richmond, Who is it that actually writes our name in the books?
We do.
Exactly correct. Hashem does not forge our signature. It's our signature. We are the ones who actually write our name either in the book of life or one of the other books. Boom. That's an extremely heavy thought, and that's where exactly we'll stop right now. Okay. So, shalom uvrakah to you, peace and a blessing. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us in our study. If you enjoyed this study and are interested in learning more from the Torah and the sages of Israel, then check us out on the internet at www.bfm101.com, or you may contact us toll-free at 1-800-639-0169. Our mailing address is Biblical Faith, P.O. Box 2, Abilene, Texas 79604. Until next time, we wish you shalom uvrakah, peace and a blessing.